The baby had been sleeping soundly when Aeska Kirven first heard the wagon wheels grinding over the rocky path that led to her cabin. And in that instant, she knew exactly who had come for her son. She straightened from the garden bed where she had been planting turnip seeds, dirt coating her green fingers, and watched the wagon crest the final hill. Spring sunlight caught the painted clan symbols on its side, red and black, her dead husband's family colors. She had not seen those colors in 8 months, not since the funeral where Jorvik's brother had stood across the burial mound and told her in front of the entire clan that she belonged to him now, that the old ways demanded it, that her son would be raised properly among his father's people. She had said no. She had walked away from the mound, from the clan, from everything except the baby in her arms and the small cabin Jorvik had built 3 years ago when they had decided to start fresh away from both their families, away from expectations, away from the weight of tradition that crushed more than it upheld. The wagon stopped 50 yards from her door. A tall orc climbed down, his tusks longer than hers, his shoulders broader. Darvok, her former husband by a law she had never agreed to follow. Behind him sat 2 clan elders, witnesses to whatever formal demand he intended to make today. Aeska did not move from her garden. She waited, her heart hammering, her hands steady only through force of will. The door to the cabin opened behind her. "Trouble," Samuel Zeller said quietly. It was not a question. "Yes," she said. Samuel stepped out onto the porch. He was a human man of 30 winters, lean and weathered from years trapping in the northern forests. He had arrived at her door last autumn looking for work, offering labor in exchange for shelter through the winter months, and she had been desperate enough for help with the firewood and the chimney repairs to say yes. He spoke little. He worked hard. He asked for nothing beyond a corner of the cabin to sleep in and simple meals. And he had held her son exactly once. The day Torvald had been burning with fever, and she had been half mad with fear, when Samuel had simply taken the baby from her shaking arms and told her to breathe, to rest, that he would watch over him. He stood at the door now wearing his usual worn trousers and patched shirt, his brown hair tied back, his expression unreadable. But he did not go back inside. Darvok approached. He was younger than Jorvik had been, more ambitious, more concerned with what the clan thought of him. He stopped 10 feet from Aeska and looked at her with something between pity and impatience. "You cannot continue this," Darvok said. His voice carried across the yard. 8 months you have hidden here. 8 months you have denied your son his birthright, his clan, his family. Enough, Aeska. The elders have come to witness. Give me the boy. He belongs with his people. Aeska felt rage and terror twist together in her chest. He belongs with his mother. You refused the bond. You rejected me in front of the clan. You have no husband, no protection, no standing. The boy is Jorvik's son. That makes him mine to raise. That makes him no one's but mine, Aeska said, her voice hard as winter stone. I carried him. I birthed him. I have fed him and kept him alive through sickness and cold. Jorvik is dead. You are not my husband. You never were. The old law says, the old law is not my law. Darvok's jaw tightened. You think you can simply choose which traditions to honor. You think you can live apart from your people and still claim their protection when it suits you. I claim nothing from the clan, Aeska said. I want nothing from you. Leave my land. This land belonged to Jorvik. It passes to his heir, to his blood. I speak for that heir until he is grown. You speak for yourself, Aeska snapped. You want the land. You want the status of raising a nephew. You want control. You do not want my son. You never even met him. Something flickered across Darvok's face. Shame, maybe, or anger at being seen so clearly. He turned his gaze to Samuel, who still stood silent on the porch steps. And what is this? Darvok asked. A human, living in my brother's house, sleeping under his roof while his widow pretends at virtue. Aeska took a step forward. Say that again. Samuel spoke before Darvok could respond. His voice was quiet, but it carried. I am a hired hand. I live in the barn loft. I work the land in exchange for meals and shelter, nothing more. It was not entirely true. Samuel did not sleep in the barn anymore. The loft had been too cold in deepest winter, and Aeska had finally told him to take the second room, the one Jorvik had meant to turn into a workshop. But the rest was true enough. Samuel worked from dawn until dusk. He mended fences and chopped firewood and hauled water from the creek. He asked for nothing. He took nothing, except that he had begun to look at her differently in recent weeks. She had noticed. She was not blind. She had seen the way his gaze lingered on her when she sang to Torvald, the way he smiled softly when she laughed at something small and ordinary. She had felt the way the air changed between them when they worked side by side in the garden, when their hands brushed passing tools, when he handed her the baby so she could nurse, and his fingers stayed gentle against hers for just a breath longer than necessary. She had not known what to do with it. She was still a widow, still grieving in her way, still angry at the world that had taken Jorvik from her in a stupid logging accident that never should have happened. But she had also begun to notice Samuel, the steadiness of him, the quiet kindness. The way he never demanded anything, never expected anything, never made her feel like she owed him something she was not ready to give. Darvok looked between them, his lip curling. The elders will hear of this. Let them hear, Aeska said. I have done nothing wrong. You have abandoned your clan. You have refused your duty. You have taken a human into your home while your husband is barely cold in the ground. The clan will not let this stand. The boy will be claimed. If not today, then soon. He turned and walked back to the wagon. The two elders sat silent and stern, watching. One of them was old Marzag, who had been a friend to Jorvik's father. The other was a woman Aeska did not know well, sharp-eyed and solemn. The wagon turned and rolled away down the path. Aeska stood in her garden and watched it go, her hands shaking now that the confrontation was done. Samuel came down the steps and stopped beside her. He did not touch her. He simply stood there, solid and present. They will come back, he said, I know. What will you do? Aeska looked at the cabin, at the garden, at the hills rolling green and gold in the spring sunlight. Jorvik had loved this place. He had chosen it because it was far from the clan, far from the rules and expectations that had chafed at him all his life. He had wanted freedom. He had wanted to build something new, and now his brother wanted to drag their son back into the same cage Jorvik had escaped. I do not know, she said quietly. The clan law is complicated. Darvok is wrong about some of it, but not all. If the elders rule in his favor, I have no way to fight them. I am one woman alone. I have no family close enough to speak for me. My mother is dead. My father disowned me when I married Jorvik because he was from a rival clan. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You are not alone. Aeska turned to look at him. His face was serious, his gray eyes steady on hers. I am human, she said. You are human. That means nothing to the clan. They will not listen to you. Maybe not, Samuel said, but I am still here. Something tight and painful loosened in Aeska's chest. She wanted to say thank you. She wanted to say that his presence mattered more than he knew, that the winter would have broken her without him, that she had begun to think of him as more than a hired hand, more than a lodger, more than even a friend. But she did not know how to say any of that. So she nodded and turned back to the garden and pushed her hands into the dirt and tried to breathe. Samuel went back to the woodpile. He picked up the axe and began splitting logs with the same steady rhythm he brought to everything he did. The sound was ordinary, comforting. Torvald woke and began to cry, and Aeska went inside to feed him. The next 3 days passed in tense waiting. Aeska kept expecting Darvok to return. She listened for wagon wheels, for footsteps, for voices raised in demand. But the hillside stayed quiet except for birdsong and the wind in the new leaves. Samuel worked. Aeska planted. Torvald grew fatter and more alert, his green eyes bright with curiosity, his tiny tusks just beginning to show at the edges of his gums. On the 4th morning, Samuel came to her while she was hanging laundry on the line behind the cabin. The air smelled like wet earth and clover. "I have an idea," he said. Aeska pinned a small shirt to the line and looked at him. "Tell me, the clan law. You said Darvok is wrong about some of it. Do you know which parts?" "The levirate marriage," Aeska said slowly. "It is not automatic. The widow has to consent. If she refuses, the brother can petition the elders, but she cannot be forced. And the children stay with the mother unless she is proven unfit or unless she willingly gives them up. So if the elders rule properly, you keep Torvald." "Yes, but Darvok has influence. His father was a war leader. The elders may side with him out of respect for the family." Samuel leaned against the fence post thinking, is there anyone who outranks the local elders, someone who knows the law better, someone who could overrule them? Aeska paused with a wet cloth in her hands. "The matriarch," she said, "Old Vashka. She is the eldest living memory keeper for the northern clans. She knows every law, every precedent, every exception. If she ruled in my favor, even Darvok's father could not argue." "Where is she?" 3 days' ride north, in the high valley beyond the granite ridges. Samuel nodded slowly. "Then I will go and bring her here." Aeska stared at him. "You do not even know her. She does not know you. Why would she listen to a human stranger?" "Because you need her," Samuel said simply. "And because I will tell her the truth, that you are a good mother, that you have harmed no one. That Darvok wants power, not justice. She may refuse. She is old and does not travel lightly, and even if she agrees, Darvok may come back before you return. If he arrives with enough witnesses, he might take Torvald by force and claim he is acting within his rights." "Then you will hold him off until I get back," Samuel said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were fierce. "You are strong enough." Aeska felt something crack open inside her. This man. This quiet, steady man who owed her nothing, who had stumbled into her life by accident, who could have left at any time. He was offering to ride into the wilderness alone, to petition an orc matriarch he had never met, to risk his own time and safety for a woman and a child who were not his. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. His expression softened. "Because you deserve help. Because Torvald deserves to stay with his mother, because it is right." It was not the whole truth. Aeska could see that. There was something else in his eyes, something he was not saying. But she did not push. She was not ready to hear it, and perhaps he was not ready to say it. "Thank you," she said quietly. Samuel nodded. "I will leave in an hour. I need to pack food and check the horse." "Take the better bedroll," Aeska said. "And the good knife. The nights are still cold in the high country." He left before midday. Aeska stood in the yard with Torvald on her hip and watched him ride north on the sturdy mare he had bought last autumn. He did not look back. He simply rode, his back straight, his purpose clear. Aeska went inside and barred the door and tried not to think about how empty the cabin felt without him. 2 more days passed. Aeska worked the garden. She milked the goat. She sang to Torvald and mended his small clothes and tried not to jump at every sound. On the 3rd day, the wagon returned. This time there were 4 orcs. Darvok, the 2 elders from before, and a younger orc Aeska recognized as Darvok's cousin, a broad-shouldered enforcer named Graphic. They came at midday when the sun was high and bright. Aeska was inside nursing Torvald when she heard the wheels. She laid the baby in his cradle and went to the door. She did not open it. She stood behind the heavy oak and spoke through the gap. "Leave my land." Darvok's voice came back, formal and cold. "Aeska Kirven, by the authority of the clan elders and the law of levirate succession, I have come to claim my brother's son. Open the door and surrender the child. Do this willingly and you may visit him. Resist and you forfeit all rights." "I have not forfeited anything," Aeska said. Her voice did not shake. "I refused your claim. I am the boy's mother. He stays with me. You have no husband, no protector, no means to raise him properly. The clan will provide, I will provide. This is your last chance to do this with dignity." "Dignity," Aeska repeated. The word tasted bitter. "You speak of dignity while you try to steal a mother's child." Marzag's voice, older and wearier, cut in. "Aeska, this does not have to be a fight. Darvok is right about the law. A widow without family support cannot keep a male child past weaning age. Torvald will need training, education, a place in the clan. You cannot give him that alone." "I am not alone," Aeska said. "The human," Darvok's voice dripped scorn, "he is nothing. A hired hand. He has no standing in this matter." "He is more than you will ever be," Aeska snapped. "He does not take what does not belong to him. He does not use law as a weapon. He does not pretend duty when he means greed." She heard Darvok say something sharp to Grathik. Footsteps approached the door. Heavy boots. Aeska stepped back and grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace. "Break this door and I will break your skull," she said loudly. The footsteps stopped. Marzag spoke again, his voice tired. "Aeska, please be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," Aeska said. "You are the ones trying to take an infant from his mother. There is nothing reasonable in that." Silence outside. Then Darvok again, angry now. "We will wait. You have to come out eventually. You have to fetch water. You have to eat. And when you do, we will take the boy. You cannot stop us. You are one woman. This is finished." Aeska heard them move away from the door, heard the wagon creak as someone climbed onto it, heard low voices talking, planning. She went to the window and looked out through the gap in the shutters. They had pulled the wagon into the yard. Darvok and Grathik stood near the fence. The two elders sat on the wagon bench, solemn as judges. A siege. They meant to wait her out. Aeska looked at the water bucket, nearly empty. The food stores were good, but she would need to fetch more water by tomorrow. And Torvald needed fresh air, sunlight, movement. She could not keep him locked inside indefinitely. Samuel had been gone 3 days. If he had found the matriarch, if she had agreed to come, they might return in 2 more days. Maybe 3. Aeska could hold out that long. She had to. She filled a cup from the bucket and drank slowly. Then she picked up Torvald and held him close and tried to think. The day dragged. Aeska watched through the shutters as the orcs outside made camp. They built a fire. They cooked food. They settled in for a long wait. Night fell. Aeska lit a single candle and kept the shutters closed. She nursed Torvald and sang to him quietly and tried not to let fear swallow her. She thought about Samuel riding north. She hoped he was safe. She hoped he had found Vashka. She hoped he was coming back. She realized, sitting there in the dark with her son in her arms, that she had begun to think of Samuel as something permanent, as someone who would stay, as someone who belonged in this cabin, in this life, in the strange small family they had begun to build without quite meaning to. She realized she wanted him to stay, not as a hired hand, not as a lodger, as something more. The thought should have frightened her. She had loved Jorvik. She had mourned him. She still missed him in moments, the way he laughed, the way he had held her. But grief was not loyalty to a ghost. Jorvik would not have wanted her to be alone forever. He had been a practical man, a kind man. He would have wanted her to be happy, and Samuel made her happy in quiet ways, in steady ways, in ways she had not expected if he came back. If they survived this, she would tell him. The next day passed in tense stillness. Aeska rationed the water. She kept Torvald entertained with songs and soft toys. She watched through the shutters as Darvok paced the yard like a wolf circling prey. By evening, the water was gone. Aeska stared at the empty bucket and weighed her options. The creek was 100 yards downhill. She could make a run for it at dawn, fill the bucket, and sprint back before they caught her. But if they grabbed her, if they took Torvald from the cabin while she was gone? No, she could not risk it. She would have to wait. Another day without water would not kill her. Torvald could still nurse. She would manage, but the next morning Torvald was fussy and warm. Not fevered, but uncomfortable. The cabin was too hot, the air too close. Aeska knew she had to open the shutters, had to let him breathe fresh air, or he would only get worse. She cracked the window just enough to let in a breeze. Immediately, Darvok saw the movement. "Aeska," he called. "Enough of this. Give me the boy. I swear he will be well cared for." "You can visit whenever you wish. This is madness." "Go away," Aeska shouted. "You are hurting him by keeping him in there. Look at yourself. You are starving. You have no water. You are being stubborn, and it is the child who suffers." Aeska closed the shutter hard. Her hands were shaking. Darvok was wrong, but he was also a little bit right. She could not keep Torvald locked in here much longer, not without harming him. Where was Samuel? The day crawled past. Aeska's throat was dry. Her head ached. Torvald cried more than usual, and she had to walk him back and forth, singing until her voice cracked. Dusk came. Then night. Aeska sat in the dark and listened to the orcs outside talking around their fire. She heard Darvok say something about breaking the door at dawn. Heard Marzag arguing against it. Heard Grathik laugh and say it would be easy. Aeska gripped the poker and waited. She must have dozed because she woke suddenly to the sound of hoofbeats. Multiple horses, moving fast. She stumbled to the window and looked out. Dawn was just breaking, the sky pale gray. 3 riders came over the hill. Samuel in front on the mare. Behind him, an ancient orc woman wrapped in furs and riding a sturdy pony. And beside her, a younger orc woman who Aeska realized with a shock was Vashka's apprentice, a memory keeper in training. Samuel had done it. He had brought the matriarch. Aeska's heart surged. She grabbed Torvald and went to the door and through the bar. Darvok was already on his feet, staring at the riders. Marzag stood slowly from the wagon, his face unreadable. Vashka dismounted with Samuel's help. She was tiny, shrunken with age, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. She leaned on a carved walking stick and looked around the yard with obvious displeasure. "Darvok Kirven," she said. Her voice was thin but hard. "Explain this." Darvok recovered quickly. He straightened and gave a respectful nod. "Honored matriarch, I am here to claim my brother's son under the law of levirate succession. His widow has refused her duty and refuses to surrender the child." Vashka's gaze shifted to Aeska, who stood in the doorway with Torvald in her arms. The old woman studied her for a long moment. "Aeska Kirven," Vashka said. "Come here." Aeska walked forward. Her legs felt weak, but she kept her head high. She stopped a few feet from the matriarch and waited. Vashka looked at Torvald, looked at Aeska, looked at the cabin, the garden, the small, neat yard. "You refused Darvok's claim to marry you," Vashka said. It was not a question. "Yes," Aeska said. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that I did not want him, that I had the right to refuse, that the levirate bond is not a chain." Vashka's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. "And the child, he is mine. I am his mother. I have cared for him since birth. I will not give him up." "Darvok claims you are unfit, that you have no support, no family, no means." "Darvok is wrong," Aeska said. I have land, I have a home, I have help. Vashka looked at Samuel, who had dismounted and now stood quietly beside his horse. The human. Yes, Aeska said. He told me an interesting story, Vashka said. He rode 3 days through hard country to find me. He learned enough of our law to know I could rule on this matter. He offered me his own silver to pay for my time. She paused. I did not take it. But I was impressed. A human who understands clan law better than many orcs, who knows that a mother keeps her child unless she consents otherwise, who thought to seek the eldest memory keeper rather than simply fight. Darvok's face darkened. The human has no standing here. This is a clan matter. It is a legal matter, Vashka said coldly. And I am the law. Be silent. Darvok closed his mouth. He looked furious, but he did not argue. Vashka turned back to Aeska. Show me the boy. Aeska lifted Torvald so the matriarch could see him. He blinked sleepily, his small tusks gleaming, his green skin bright in the early light. Vashka reached out one gnarled hand and touched his cheek. Torvald grabbed her finger and held on. The old woman's expression softened just a fraction. He is healthy, well cared for, loved. Vashka looked at Aeska. You have done well. Thank you, Aeska whispered. Vashka turned to Darvok. Your claim is denied. The levirate bond requires consent. Aeska Kirven refused you. That is her right. The child remains with his mother, who is fit and capable. You have no authority here. Darvok's hands clenched into fists. My brother's son belongs with his clan, with his blood. Not hidden away in the wilderness with a human. Careful, Vashka said softly. The word cut like a blade. You are speaking to a matriarch. You will not question my ruling. You will not insult this woman further. You will leave this place and you will not return unless invited. Do you understand? Marzag stood and bowed his head. We understand, honored matriarch. We will go. Darvok looked like he wanted to argue. But Grathik put a hand on his shoulder and shook his head slightly. Even Darvok was not foolish enough to defy Vashka directly. He turned and climbed onto the wagon. Grathik followed. Marzag gave Aeska a long look, something like apology in his eyes, and then he too climbed up. The wagon rolled away down the hill. Aeska watched it go, her heart pounding, her arms tight around Torvald. It was over. Vashka turned to her apprentice, a young woman named Kalith. Fetch the parchment. I will write this ruling formally and leave a copy. If Darvok is foolish enough to try again, he will face the full council. Kalith hurried to unpack the writing materials from her saddlebag. Vashka lowered herself onto a stump near the garden and began to write, her hand slow but steady. Samuel approached Aeska quietly. He looked exhausted, his face shadowed with days of hard riding, but his eyes were warm. You did it, Aeska said. We did it, Samuel corrected. He looked at Torvald and smiled. He is still here. That is all that matters. Aeska wanted to say so much. Wanted to tell him what his help meant, what his presence meant, what he meant. But Vashka was watching with those sharp eyes and Kalith was listening, and Aeska's courage failed. Instead she said, Thank you for everything. Samuel nodded. He reached out and gently touched Torvald's head, his fingers brushing the baby's soft hair. Torvald cooed and grabbed at his hand. Vashka finished writing and handed the parchment to Kalith, who read it over and then brought it to Aeska. Keep this safe, Vashka said. It is your protection. If anyone from the clan questions your right to raise your son, show them this. My word is law in the northern clans. Even Darvok's father will not challenge it. I do not know how to thank you, Aeska said. Vashka waved a hand dismissively. Thank the human. He is the one who convinced me to make this journey. He is very persistent. She stood with Kalith's help and made her way to her pony. Samuel helped her mount, his hands steady and careful. Vashka looked down at him. You are a strange creature, Samuel Zeller. Most humans would not ride into orc lands to petition a matriarch for a widow they barely know. Samuel met her gaze evenly. I know her well enough. Vashka's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. She looked at Aeska. You could do worse. Then she turned her pony and rode away, Caliph following. They disappeared over the hill and the yard fell silent. Aeska stood holding Torvald, staring at Samuel. He stared back. You must be tired, she said finally, and hungry. Come inside. I will make you something to eat. Samuel nodded. He followed her into the cabin, and for the first time in days, Aeska closed the door without barring it. The danger was over. She was safe. They were safe. She fed Samuel the last of the bread and cheese and eggs while he told her about the ride north. About finding Vashka's settlement in the High Valley, about convincing her to listen, to come to rule. She did not want to at first, Samuel said. She said she was too old for such journeys, but I told her about you, about Torvald, about Darvok, and she said something that surprised me. What? Aeska asked. She said, a mother's bond is the oldest law, older than clans, older than blood feuds, older than any tradition men have invented to control women. If this Darvok does not understand that, then he understands nothing. And then she packed her things and we left. Aeska felt her throat tighten. She is right. I know, Samuel said quietly. He looked at her across the table. You are a good mother, Aeska. Torvald is lucky. I am the lucky one, Aeska said. I have him, and I have you. The words hung in the air between them. Samuel went very still. Aeska, he said slowly, I need to tell you something. I know, she said. You know, I have eyes, Aeska said. A small smile tugged at her mouth. I have seen the way you look at me, the way you help without being asked, the way you held my son when he was sick, the way you rode into the wilderness for us. Samuel's face flushed. He looked down at his hands. I did not mean to overstep. I know you are still grieving. I know I am just a hired hand. I know I have no right to. You have every right, Aeska interrupted. You have earned it. You have been here when no one else was. You have been kind when the world was cruel. You have been steady when I was falling apart. She stood and walked around the table. Torvald was asleep in his cradle by the fire. The cabin was warm and quiet and filled with soft morning light. Aeska stopped in front of Samuel. He looked up at her, his gray eyes wide and uncertain. I love Jorvik, Aeska said. I will always love the memory of him, but he is gone, and I am still here. I am still alive, and I do not want to be alone anymore. You do not have to be, Samuel said. His voice was rough. I know, Aeska said, because you are here, and I want you to stay, not as a hired hand, not as a lodger, as my husband, if you will have me. Samuel stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. He stared at her, his face full of shock and hope and something fierce and bright. You mean that, he said. I mean it, Aeska said. I want you to stay. I want to raise Torvald with you. I want to build a life here with you. Samuel reached out and took her hands. His grip was warm and strong and careful, like he was holding something precious. I have wanted that since the day I first saw you, he said. I just never thought you would want it too. I do, Aeska said. I want it very much. Samuel smiled. It was the first real smile she had ever seen from him, bright and unguarded and full of joy. He pulled her close and kissed her, gentle at first and then deeper, and Aeska wrapped her arms around him and kissed him back with everything she had been holding inside for months. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Samuel rested his forehead against hers. I will be good to you, he said. I will be good to Torvald, I swear it. I know, Aeska said. You already are. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony by the creek. Vashka sent Caliph to witness and bless the union, which gave it legitimacy in the eyes of both human and orc communities. Aeska wore a simple dress of blue linen that had been her mother's. Samuel wore his best shirt, mended and clean. Torvald gurgled happily in Calith's arms while the vows were spoken. The words were traditional, borrowed from both cultures, woven together into something new. Aeska promised to stand beside Samuel in hardship and joy. Samuel promised to protect and cherish Aeska and Torvald as long as he lived. Calith bound their hands with a green ribbon and spoke the old blessing over them. May your roots grow deep. May your branches shelter those you love. May you weather every storm together. They sealed the vows with a kiss, and Calith smiled and handed Torvald back to Aeska. He will need a father, Calith said quietly to Samuel. Not just in name, he is Orc. He will face prejudice. He will need someone to teach him that his worth is not determined by what others think. I know, Samuel said. He took Torvald from Aeska and held him carefully, his large hands steady. I will teach him. I will make sure he knows he is loved. Calith nodded, satisfied. She stayed for a meal and then rode back north, carrying word to Vashka that the union was complete and proper. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Samuel was no longer a hired hand. He was Aeska's husband, Torvald's father, a partner in every sense. He expanded the garden and built a second room onto the cabin. He taught Aeska how to set snares and read animal tracks. She taught him how to cook Orc recipes, how to sing the old songs, how to braid leather into rope. Torvald grew. He learned to crawl, then to walk, then to run. He was a bright, curious child with his mother's green skin and his father Jorvik's bold spirit. But he also had Samuel's quiet determination, the way he would sit for hours watching the world and thinking. Samuel was patient with him. He answered endless questions. He taught Torvald how to stack firewood, how to gentle the goats, how to plant seeds in straight rows. He never raised his voice, never lost his temper, never made Torvald feel small or foolish, and Torvald adored him. He called Samuel Papa from the time he could speak, and Samuel's face lit up every time he heard it. Aeska watched them together and felt a fierce gratitude. She had been so afraid of losing her son, of facing the world alone, and now she had this. A family, a home. A husband who loved her and a son who was safe and happy. The seasons turned. Summer blazed hot and golden. Autumn came with cool winds and the smell of ripe apples. Winter settled in with snow and long nights by the fire. One evening in deep winter, Aeska and Samuel sat together after Torvald had gone to bed. The fire crackled softly. The wind howled outside, but the cabin was warm and safe. "Do you ever think about going back?" Aeska asked. "To wherever you came from before you found us?" Samuel looked at her surprised. "No, never. Why would I? I do not know. I just wonder sometimes. You gave up your old life to stay here. You took on a ready-made family. You married a widow with a child. That is a lot to ask of anyone." Samuel reached out and took her hand. "You did not ask." "I chose, and I would choose it again every single time. Even with all the trouble, Darvok and the clan and everything. Especially with all the trouble," Samuel said. "Because it means I get to be here, with you, with Torvald. This is the life I want, Aeska, the only life." Aeska leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the fire and the wind and the soft sound of Torvald breathing in the next room. Spring came again, and with it new beginnings. Aeska discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and fear in equal measure. She had carried Torvald while Jorvik was alive, and the birth had been hard but safe. But this time was different. This time she was older, more aware of all the things that could go wrong. Samuel was steady as always. He made sure she rested, that she ate well, that she did not lift anything too heavy. He took over more of the farm work and hired a local boy to help with the harvest. Torvald, now 3 years old, was fascinated by the idea of a sibling. He patted Aeska's growing belly and asked endless questions. Would the baby be big or small? Would it be a brother or a sister? Would it like to play with him? We will see, Aeska told him. Babies are full of surprises. The birth came in late autumn, just as the leaves were turning gold and red. Aeska labored through the night with a midwife from the nearest village, a kind human woman named Marjorie who had delivered dozens of babies and did not blink at the fact that Aeska was an orc. Samuel stayed close, holding Aeska's hand, whispering encouragement. And when the baby finally came, red-faced and squalling, Marjorie laid the child in Aeska's arms and smiled. "A daughter," she said, "strong and healthy." Aeska looked down at the tiny girl, at her green skin and delicate features and the small buds of tusks that would grow in time. She felt tears slide down her face. Samuel leaned over and kissed Aeska's forehead. "She is beautiful. She is perfect," Aeska whispered. They named her Alara. Samuel had suggested it, and Aeska loved the sound of it. Aeska Zeller. A name that belonged to both their worlds, human and orc, woven together. Torvald was allowed in to meet his sister the next morning. He climbed onto the bed carefully and stared at the baby with wide eyes. "She is so small," he said. "You were that small once," Aeska told him. Torvald reached out one finger and Alara grabbed it with her tiny fist. He laughed, delighted. "She is strong." "She is," Samuel said, "just like her mother, just like her brother." The years that followed were full and rich. The farm prospered. Aeska and Samuel added chickens and a cow. They built a larger barn and a proper workshop. Torvald grew tall and sturdy, learning to read and write from Samuel and learning the old orc stories from Aeska. Alara was a bright, curious child who followed her brother everywhere and asked even more questions than he did. The neighbors, human and orc alike, slowly accepted the unusual family. There were still those who muttered about mixed marriages and improper unions, but Samuel and Aeska ignored them. They had each other. They had their children. They had built something good and true, and no amount of prejudice could take that away. Darvok never returned. Aeska heard through travelers that he had married within the clan and was raising a family of his own. She felt no anger toward him anymore, only a distant pity. He had wanted control and status. She had wanted love and freedom. They had both gotten what they sought. One summer evening when Torvald was 10 and Alara was 7, the family sat outside watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and gold. The fields were green and lush. The air smelled like wildflowers and fresh earth. Torvald was carving a small wooden horse under Samuel's guidance. Alara was braiding grass stems into a crown. Aeska sat with her back against the fence, watching her family, feeling a contentment so deep it almost hurt. Samuel caught her eye and smiled. The same smile he had given her the day she asked him to stay. The smile that said he had found his place, his purpose, his home. Aeska smiled back. She thought about the girl she had been, the widow alone and terrified, the mother fighting to keep her son. She thought about the man who had arrived at her door looking for work and had stayed to give her everything she needed. "Mama," Alara said, holding up her grass crown, "look what I made." "It is beautiful," Aeska said. Alara placed the crown on her own head and twirled, laughing. Torvald looked up from his carving and grinned. Samuel reached out and took Aeska's hand. She squeezed his fingers, and they sat together in the fading light, watching their children play, grateful for every ordinary, precious moment. The farm would pass to Torvald someday, and then perhaps to his children. The family would grow and change and spread its roots deeper into this land. The prejudice would fade slowly as people saw that love did not care about the color of skin or the shape of tusks, but that was the future. For now there was this: the sunset, the laughter, the warmth of Samuel's hand in hers. The knowledge that she was loved, that her children were safe, that the life she had fought so hard to protect was hers to keep. Aeska had been afraid once, afraid of loss, of loneliness, of a world that seemed determined to take everything from her. But she was not afraid anymore. She had Samuel. She had Torvald and Alara. She had this farm, this life, this love, and that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. As the stars began to appear overhead, Samuel pulled Aeska close and kissed her temple. "Happy?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Aeska said, "so happy." And she meant it with every fiber of her being. The night deepened around them, warm and gentle and full of promise, and the family sat together under the vast sky, safe and whole and home.